Hello, this is Jennifer and welcome back. I apologize that I disappeared for a while. However, our oldest daughter got married out in Portland on a very hot, unusually hot day, but it was absolutely wonderful. But I'm home now and I wanted to share with you a video that I shot a few weeks ago. And these are more ideas for using your layering dies creatively. As you know, I'm a big fan of layering dies. I think there are so many creative ways you can use them, and you can use your scraps with them too. However, because of the higher price point, we really need to get creative and come up with as many ways to use them so we can get the value out of it. So today I'm going to show you just some ways to kind of change them up and also some tips for better working with layering die cuts and getting better results. I have a lot of examples for you, and I'll be using some dies I've used in previous videos also, just so you can see more ideas. Before we get started, I did want to talk about the adhesives that I recommend when using very intricate die cuts like these. For super intricate die cuts, I like the E6000 spray adhesive. I'm not a big fan of sprays, but this is a pump, and I only use it when it's super intricate, like the top layer of this layering set. I take it off screen and I spray it into a box, and then I put that die cut onto the next die cut. It doesn't dry immediately. It will kind of curl up a little bit. You just put something heavy on it and it'll dry after a couple minutes. The other option is the Barely Art glue. This has a very fine tip to it that's available. I do recommend getting that little rubber stopper that hangs off so it doesn't clog, and I'll link to all of this below. This one is good for putting teeny tiny amounts of glue here and there on the back of intricate die cuts. So you'll be seeing me use this today. The spray I do off screen, so you don't really see that in the video, but I wanted to mention those are two great adhesives for intricate die cuts like these, and they hold nicely. I will say I also like using Gina K Connect Liquid Adhesive, which I've used for a long time now, and I still use a lot for larger areas. Another topic I wanted to touch on before we get started is adding additional layers to your layered die cuts. This is something I do often where I stack die cuts to increase the results of the dimension, and it really makes a big impact. So let me show you two examples here. On the left, I just die cut the 3 layers and glued them together. On the right, I die cut to each of the 3 layers and glued those together. Notice the difference. The one on the right has a lot more dimension to it. And to me, it makes a big difference. It may not to you, which is totally fine, but I wanted to mention that. Sometimes I do double up those layers. So there's actually 6 die cuts on the right and only 3 on the left. If you've never stacked die cuts for additional dimension, I encourage you to try it once. See if it makes a difference to your eye. And that's something that maybe you could include in your card making in the future. Okay, let's get started with some creative ideas for using layering die cuts. I am actually going to use one die set in a few different ways just to show you some different looks, and then we'll move on to a different die set and do the same for that. So let's start first with this Birch Press layering die set. There are 3 dies included. The one in the middle is the top layer, the one on the left is the bottom layer, and the one over on the right is the middle layer. And this one's really neat because it does those little debossed lines, which adds a lot of character to the layering die cuts. Now here's a basic card I made where I just used the 3 dies and cut from 3 different colors of purple cardstock, and I glued them together. Nothing fancy, just basic gluing those 3 layers together. But I did step it up and add interest by putting glitter behind the layered die cut so it would show through the openings. I also added some gemstones here and there on the pattern. I like to put my sentiment right in the center since that's the focal point and where the eye will go. For the high, I used the Greetery Bold Alphabet die set, which you'll see a little later in this video. And then on top of that, I used a Simon Says Stamp sentiment strip. Those are pre-printed, you just cut them out and add them, super fast to use. I use them a lot today. And for the background, I used the Birch Press Pinpoint Radial die. It's a background die that just creates pinpoint circles, which is really nice with these circle layering dies. It creates kind of a focal point. And I've used that in many videos. It's one of my most used dies. So that's a basic use of that layering die set. Let's use the same layering die set, but cut up our layers to get a different look. And that's what I did for this card here. I used the same dies as before, and I cut 3 from yellow cardstock. The top layer is a light yellow, the middle layer is medium, and the bottom layer is a dark yellow. I did the same with shades of pink and the same with shades of peach. Off screen, I glued the layers together, so I ended up with one yellow layered circle, one pink, and one peach. From the yellow, I'm cutting out the center of the pattern. I'm just following the pattern that the dies create. So I'll end up with like this yellow flower, a small yellow flower that will go in the center of our layered die cut. So you can alter your layering dies, change the size by just cutting down some of the pattern. You could use this individual flower here as an accent on a card, but today we're going to layer it up. Now from the peach, I'm doing the same. I'm cutting away some of the layered die cut, but this time I'm cutting around that larger flower that's kind of at the center there. Then I left the pink as is. Now we can glue these together. You could either line them back up, so you kind of follow the pattern that the die made, and you end up with this really fun, colorful layered look. However, I thought I'd give it an even more interesting look by turning them a little bit. So I turned that peach one a bit so it's offset, then I turned the yellow one a bit so it's offset, and it just shows more of the layers. It doesn't hide as much behind it, and just gives a new look to that die cut set. So now I can glue these together and then add them to the front of a card. But remember, I could skip that pink circle behind it, and I would have a peach and yellow flower and could just have a little leaf sticking out from it. There are oftentimes many ways you can cut up your layered die cuts to get a different shape or different look. Here I ended up putting them all back into a circle because I liked that look, but I could have stuck with the flower. I decided to also add a darker pink cardstock to the back of it so it would show through those holes in the center. Next, I'm using my little corner helpers here to adhere this background die cut onto a white note card. This is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I again use that Pinpoint Radial die, which just does pinpoint circles. Now, since this is a larger area, I'm using my Gina K Connect liquid adhesive, and I added that right to the center of the card. I did add a Simon Says Stamp sentiment strips, again, those are the pre-printed ones, right to the center of the card, and a few gemstones. So these two cards were made with the same layering die set, but you get a different look by cutting apart and then relayering. If I really wanted to change it up, I could have skipped that pink layer behind the orange and yellow flower and added a leaf, and it would look like a flower instead of a layered circle. So think about what layering dies you have and if you can cut them down and then reassemble them to get a different look. Okay, let's do 2 more cards using this same layering die set from Birch Press. This time I'm cutting my layered die cut circles in half so I can use them in different ways on a card. So I did the layering of these die cuts. I used 3 different colors of blue cardstock. Now make sure your adhesive is dry before you try to use a trimmer to cut through them. If the adhesive is wet, it kind of causes the paper to tear, so just let them dry completely. And again, I'm just using that trimmer to cut right down the center. So now I have more die cuts than I originally started with, and I can really get creative on my card. Here I'm using my paper sander, which I really like, to kind of smooth out those cut edges so that it'll look nice when glued to the edge of my card. Okay, I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card, and I'm using my T-ruler just to put a line down the center. This will help me make sure that I glue these down centered and I get the spacing just right. I usually like to do a line down the center in both directions and just use that as a guide. So now I'm putting adhesive on the back of one of the halves of our die cut circles and gluing that to the center bottom, and then I'll glue one to the center top. Now I needed to add some to the corners, so I'm putting a little bit of adhesive on the back of one of my half circles and put that right in the corner. Notice a lot of it is hanging off, so I can flip my card over and cut off the extra, and then use that piece that we cut off on the other corners. I'm really trying to use as much of these layered die cuts as I can and not let any go to waste. Now for sentiment on this one, I use the Pocket Full of Happiness Thank You die set. That's over there on the right. And over on the left is the Hey There die set. These are really nice because there's different ways you can layer them. I'll use the thank you on this card and the hey there later in this video. Really like the style of these. I die cut the shadow for the words thank you from white cardstock, and I did 2 die cuts of each word and glued those together for dimension. Now I'm using a T-ruler to make sure I get them straight. I'm making sure the T of thank you is all the way on the left of the card, and now for you, I made sure the letter U is all the way to the right. just so I had enough room for the words to stretch across. Now on top of those white shadow die cuts that we've added to the card, I'm gluing some layered thank you sentiments. This has white as the shadow and some blue glitter cardstock from Pink and Main for the words thank you. I used a lot of dimension behind those so they would stand up from the layering die cuts. Now to finish off the card, I just added some dark blue gemstones from Lucy's cards, and that's it. I really like the detail that the layering dies provide and that bold sentiment across the center. So look at your layering die cuts and see if there's a way you can cut it in half to get a different look and put the pieces in a different way. Now the best part is I have leftover die cut pieces. So let's make a second card. This one's a little bit different. And this time I did a custom card size. I usually start with a basic card size, but sometimes it's fun to let your products dictate what size the card should be. So let me show you here. I have a piece of white cardstock. It's bigger than I need, but I'm going to glue one of our leftover half circles right in the bottom corner. I will then glue another right next to it, right up against it. So if I would have started with a typical 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card, the spacing would be similar to what we did on the last card, but I wanted a different look. I wanted these pushed together close. So I'm letting that dictate what size this card will be. Now I'm trimming my paper down so it's as wide as that circle there on the bottom. This is something that was inspired by Kathy Rakusin, which I'll link to. She just makes cards any size she wants and puts them in a bigger envelope. And I think that's great. You don't have to restrict yourself to what note card sizes people typically use. All right, now I'm gluing one on the other side here, and this one will go right up against them in that open area on the top. And then we can trim that excess white off of that. Now for a sentiment on this one, I again used the Greetery Bold Alphabet die set, which I used on my first card today. I really like the detail of these. You can see the little embossing marks it makes. So off screen, I die cut the word hello twice from white cardstock and once from silver cardstock and glued those together with the silver on top. Now I'm using a sticky mat, and I use the sticky mat to hold the letters while I get the positioning just right. And I use the lines on the sticky mat just to make sure it's all straight and spaced evenly. Once I like the positioning of those letters, I take a piece of tape and I press it over the letters, then peel the tape off, lifting the letters so I can bring it over to my project. Now I can kind of move it around until I see where I want it to be positioned, and then put liquid adhesive on the back of those letters. Make sure it's something strong, you want these to stay put, and then I can pick it back up and center it right across the front of our card. This is so much easier than trying to get the letters individually on the card. I also added a simple Simon Says stamp sentiment strip under the word hello. To complete this card, I matted our white background with navy cardstock and glued it onto a card of the same size. This overall card size is about 6 1/4 by 3 3/4, which is a little odd. I needed an envelope to fit it. So I'm taking a 5 by 7 envelope and altering it a bit to fit my card. For this card, I cut about a 1/2 inch off the envelope, and that gives a good amount of room for the card to fit. Now I could have just put it in a regular 5 by 7 envelope and not alter it, but there would be a lot of wiggle room, and I liked the card to fit in the envelope a little tighter. Now I'm putting a line of liquid adhesive right along where I cut that envelope to reseal it so it's closed across the bottom too. You could also use double-sided tape if you prefer. Now that I'm sure the letters for hello are dry, I can remove that tape, and here we have our completed card. Again, it's about 6 1/4 by 3 3/4, and you can see it really fits those half circles well. The funny thing is the card that I had planned was the last one that said thank you, and I just did this because I had the leftover half circles. Well, I ended up liking this one even more than the last one. So I always encourage you to use those extras to try something new. You may be happy with the results. Also, I highly encourage you to mix and match brands. I know a lot of people like to use one brand on a card because it matches easily, but in this case, check out how the detail in the letters, hello, really go nicely with the detail in those Birch Press layered die cuts. So that's the Greetery and Birch Press, 2 different companies, but it works well together. Okay, let's move on to another layering die set, and we'll do a few creative uses of it. Now, this is definitely my favorite of the layering dies today. There are 3 dies in this Tranquility layering set, but what's cool is each die cuts a ring and an inside circle, so you can use them together or separately. Let's look at a really basic card where I just glued layers together and assembled the pieces. It's really easy to do. So the outside there, I did 3 shades of peach. The inside, I did 3 shades of blue. And then I put some holographic cardstock behind the blue so that would show through, which really catches the light nicely, kind of like the glitter paper in the example from before. I again used the Birch Press Radial Pinpoint die for that white cardstock on the note card, and a Simon Says sentiment strip right there in the center. Those are so fast to add to a card. I also added some white pearls for a little bit of detail, and there you can see that background too. So this is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I just glued the layers together, and I have a leftover blue ring and a leftover peach circle for the inside to make a second card if I wanted. Now, before we get into creatively changing up the look of these layering dies, I wanted to mention one simple idea, and that is to use any leftover extras on the center of one of your layering die cuts. This particular pink layered die cut arranged in the center is a great backdrop for anything you want to add to it. Here I had this little leftover Wildflower die cut. I had it assembled for a different card, never used it, put it in my extras drawer, and then I was able to quickly add it onto this pink layered die cut. And it's just the right pop of color there in the center, and that layered die cut is a great backdrop for that simple die cut. So look through your extras drawer, see what you can add onto a layered die cut background to give it a new look. By the way, that little flower that I added is from the Greetery BotaniCuts Wildflower Mix die set. I've used this many times in videos, and that's why I had some leftovers assembled in my extras drawer. In my extras drawer, I also found an assembled yellow layered butterfly, and I thought it'd be fun to again use the Tranquility layering die set as a backdrop. So you can see I just used the yellow rings from that die, and I did 3 shades of yellow, and left the center open. Over that, I added an Altenew Dovetail butterfly. Now that butterfly is left over from a previous video. I'll link to it up here on the top right, but now I've put it to use by using a layering die cut as a backdrop. I also added a Simon Says stamp sentiment strip to the center, and I used a simple pinpoint background die on the white note card. So again, this is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, very basic, just using the layering dies as a backdrop. Now let's get a little more creative with the layering dies themselves to get different looks. Here I thought it'd be fun to layer them off to the side to create a kind of a different shape for the layering die. This one has a lot of dimension to it because that's what I like to do, but you could definitely do less layers if you prefer. So I have created 2 pink rings, 2 blue rings, and 1 green ring. Now those leftover circles from the center I'm saving for one of our next cards. Now I'm gluing together the blue and the pink, but slightly offset. So the blue is sticking out towards the left. Now I'm going to take my scissors and cut away that blue that's being hidden. Might as well save that for another card instead of letting it go to waste back there. And now I have a green ring that I will glue on top of that. So I'm cutting away some of the pink ring that will get hidden because we don't want it to go to waste. And now we can glue the green ring on top. So if you are layering any of your layered die cuts like this, be sure to save anything from the back that would be hidden because you can use those little bits and pieces on something else. Now I have done the same with the blue and the pink rings over on the other side. So check out that cool look we get. Lots of layer, and I have leftover pieces. Now I added that onto a white note card, and once again I did a custom size that fit well with the layered die cut piece we created, and I cut down a 5x7 envelope to fit it. Because there's so much detail in all those layered die cuts we did, I kept the note card plain white, and I didn't add any gems or anything else to it. I did put layered yellow die cuts in the center. That was left over from that butterfly card I just showed you. In the center, I added a simple thanks die cut. I did the shadow in white, and then the thanks letters in black glossy cardstock. And that's from a Photoplay thanks die set. So with this one, after I did all the die cutting, the card came together quickly, and I have the leftover circles and parts of the rings left over for another card. Let's go ahead and use the circles from that, and I did a few additional colors too. As before, I cut the circles in half to get a different look. This time the idea is to use those to create a border on a card. You could do it along the edge, but I decided to build a border above and below a sentiment strip. I have a piece of white cardstock here, and right down the center, I'm gluing a stack of white cardstock strips. And I'm doing it 3 or 4 tall, so it's a nice border right there in the middle where I can add my sentiment strip on top and put the circle halves up against it. So you can see it there. I use my T-ruler to make sure that I keep it straight. I'm starting with the center. I drew a little pencil mark where the center is, and I added the pink right up against that border we put in the middle. And now I'll add the other half circles around it. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about adhesive before is when you have layered die cuts like this, they're pretty bulky or pretty heavy. You really want to make sure you're using a strong adhesive. And I do recommend for something like this using either the Barely Art Glue or the Gina K Connect liquid adhesive. I don't use the spray for these heavy ones. I think something liquid and stronger is a better option. So I trimmed that background down and added it to a black note card that is slightly bigger, and I'll use a white gel pen to write a personal message on the inside. I also added a black cardstock strip where I white heat embossed "You're the Best Ever," and that's from the Concord and 9th Lots to Say stamp set. That black strip is glued on top of the white cardstock strips we stacked there in the center. So this sits right on top of all of the edges of those half circles. And I did also add a few gemstones to the circle, but not many, just enough to create a little bit of sparkle. It's hard to think that this card was created with the same Tranquility layering dies that our last thanks card was created with. This is just the circles from the center, and I changed the look by cutting them in half and creating a border. I still had some layered circles left over, so I thought I would do a simple square card. I glued 4 circles right up against each other onto a piece of white cardstock that's about 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 inches and added it to a 4 1/2 inch square black note card. I added a large Thinking of You sentiment strip, that's from Simon Says Stamp once again, and added white pearls to the colorful circles. So again, these are just leftover circles from those rings that we created earlier. So look at your layering die sets and think about how you can use parts of the layering die to create smaller patterns like this. Okay, let's move on to another layering die set. This time I'm making a pair of cards and showing you that depending on how you line up your layers, you can get different looks. In both cases, I have a sun card, but they look a bit different. Okay, for this, I'm using the Birch Press Starburst layer dies. It has these 3 Starbursts that you can layer in different ways. This is the same set, I just layered them differently. On the left, you can see the 3 layers of yellow all lined up together, and on the right, I offset them to create a really fun Starburst pattern. And I'll use those along with the circle centers from the Tranquility die set, this one here, that I used on my last cards. So in this case, I'm combining 2 layering die sets together to create a new look, and in this case, to form suns. Now I'm using them as suns, but you could use this Starburst layering die set for something for the holidays, maybe with a sentiment like Rejoice, or you could make an ornament from them, or you could use it on a birthday card and just have these little stars in the background. You could again cut them in half and just have like a Starburst border form from them. Lots of things you could do. Well, for my suns, I wanted a sentiment that went along with suns, so I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Greeting Mix 1 stamp set. Up there at the top, it has Sending Sunshine Your Way. Thought that would be perfect for this. So I white heat embossed that on a black cardstock strip and added it right to the center of our suns. Here are our 2 cards, and you can see how the rays of the sun are different depending on how I layered that same layering die set. I did add some little gemstones and pearls to the background. I just felt like that sparkle really added to the sunshine feel of this. And I used the Memory Box Pinpoint Burst background die to create those additional rays, the pinpoint ray pattern on the white background. This card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and once you do the die cutting, again, all you have to do is glue the layers together and form the card. Doesn't take long at all. Here I used the same background die as the other one, same sentiment, same pearls and gems, but we have the rays layered in a little bit of a different way. So you get a different look and so many ways you can use this. And by the way, I'll use this Birch Press Layering Starburst die set again in a future video because I really feel with these layering dies, the more you use them, the better the value. So we want to use it in as many ways as possible. Okay, let's move on to our next layering die set that I have a few different examples with. Now, I forgot to mention this earlier. A couple videos ago, I used a lot of these same layering dies, but used them as stencils. I will link to that video up here in the top right. Today, I'm sticking with using the actual layering die cuts, but check that out if you want more ideas for the same dies. Now for the next few cards, I'm using the Birch Press Delight dies, and you can see the 3 dies there. These are very intricate, and I find this one is a really easy one to alter to get different looks. So here I've glued 3 shades of peach together, and it looks beautiful as is. However, I'm going to cut each of these little petals off so that they're each separate, and I can form a flower look from it. I start by cutting it in half, and then I can continue to cut, and I'm just cutting from the indentation on one side of the die cut to the indentation on the other side. It's really easy to follow the pattern. Again, make sure your adhesive is completely dry, your liquid glue in there, make sure it's completely dry before you try to cut it. And I do recommend a trimmer like this that you can cut down onto it as opposed to a rotary trimmer. So now I have these individual petals, and so I can glue them together separately, spaced out, so it looks more like a flower. Next, I die cut 2 yellow circles, as you can see there in the center. One was slightly smaller than the other. I will glue the petals to the back of that yellow circle, and the yellow circle will form the center. So here I'm putting adhesive on one of the tips of one of the petals and gluing it to the one side of the yellow circle. Then I will glue one directly across from that. Next, I will glue one halfway between on one side and then directly across from that. Then finally, I will glue the last 4 petals in between these. So this gives a little bit of space in between each petal and makes it look more like a flower instead of one solid layering die set. The rest of this card is very simple. It's a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card, and I added a green border behind the flower just for a pop of color. I added the flower on top along with some pink pearls and a simple black hello to the center, and that is the Birch Press Sugar Hello script die. That's one I've used many times in videos. It's a nice basic one. So in this case, I changed the look of that layering die by cutting it apart and reassembling it into a flower. Now here's another example with the same colors, same die, but I changed it a bit and cut it in half and separated the 2 halves to make it look like an oval instead of a circle. Very easy to do. So I have a layering die cut already assembled, let the glue dry, and now I'm cutting it in half. I also have a stamped sentiment strip there. This is the Waffle Flower Caring Hand sentiment set. I've used this one before. I really like the sentiments. I matted that sentiment with black cardstock, so a little bit was peeking above and below the sentiment. I put foam tape on the back of it, and now I'm gluing it right into the center of my white note card. I'm gluing half of our layered die cut above it and half below it, kind of tucking the straight edge of the layered die cut underneath that border. So basically, I'm changing the look of this layering die by putting a little bit of space in between it and covering it with the sentiment so it looks like an oval instead of a circle. Simple changes can create really fun looks. Here's another example with the same die set where I cut it up and reassembled it to get a different shape. And this time I have a really tall oval with 3 sentiments across. So this time I started with blue and green cardstock that I layered together. I let that adhesive dry, and now I'm cutting it up. And you can see I'm kind of cutting straight across, creating slices from this die cut. And I'm just following the pattern that the die cut provides. Very easy to do. And I cut up 2 or 3 this way. So look at all these different pieces that I have. I can assemble them in many ways. I could use a couple of these ends together to create a frame, put a simple sentiment in between. I can create a border, lots of things we can do. I decided to make a really long oval with 3 sentiments going across. This is a great way to fill a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. For the sentiments, I used the Waffle Flower Oversized Hello stamp set. This has lots of sentiments that I could use together as 3 sentiment strips along the card. I white heat embossed those sentiments on 3 green cardstock strips. But I want to build up a base for those cardstock strips. I'm doing the technique I did earlier, where I'm taking 3 white cardstock strips, stacking them together right along the center of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. Once I have those stacked, you could also use foam tape if you wanted, I will glue that sentiment strip right on top. Next, I can take 2 of the slices that I created from the layered die cuts, glue one above and one below, kind of tucking it under that green. Probably would have been better to glue that green strip on last, but I didn't think of it at the time. Okay, now I can create 2 stacked white die cut borders right against the bottom piece and one against the top piece. So this is just building up some dimension so that the green will sit on top of everything. As I mentioned, you could use a foam tape strip here, but I find that by cutting my own scraps to build dimension, it holds up better in the mail. I can get any width I want, and it puts to use little scraps and strips that I have left over. So there I put the green on top of it this time, and I'll do the same at the top of the card. So I did put holographic cardstock behind our layered die cuts, so that's what that sparkle is that's showing through. So think about that. Anything you put behind these layered die cuts will show through, so you can use glitter cardstock, holographic, foil, anything you want, and it adds easy sparkle. There are no gems on this card, and look at how it catches the light. All right, so there I took a layered circle die, changed it up a bit, and made it an oval backdrop for these 3 sentiments. I plan to make more like this using different color combinations and leaving the sentiments off until I find an occasion I need one for, and then add whatever sentiment is appropriate. Okay, my last card today is just another example of rethinking your layering die cuts. In one case, we're going to alter it, and in one case, we're combining 2 together to get a different look. In my last layering die cut video, I did a lot of butterflies. Again, I'll link to it up here. One of the layering butterfly die sets I really like is the Butterfly Basics, because this has all the basic shapes, and you can mix and match with their other layering butterfly die sets, or you can use it alone. I'm also using the Birch Press Starlight Butterfly Layer die set. This matches nicely with that Starburst layering die set from before. I really like the look of it. Using these layering die sets, I created a pink layered butterfly with glitter cardstock in the back, and I cut it in half. Now I'm using the little antenna that I used the basic butterfly die set for, cut that from silver glitter cardstock. And I made 2 bodies, one that I'll glue to the 2 halves. I'm taking a full open wing butterfly and creating 2 side view butterflies. Stick with me here. I also created 2 solid colored dark pink butterfly wings, cut those in half, and now I'm gluing one over to the left-hand butterfly, slightly offset so it sticks out a bit on the top. Now this butterfly is starting to look like a side view instead of half of a butterfly. See how it's offset there? I did put foam tape on this just to give it a little bit of dimension from the layered glitter die cut on top. So there you can see I'm gluing this one here, and now we have 2 butterflies facing inward. To complete that look and really make it look more obvious that it's facing inward, I'm cutting off the inside antenna from both, and I'll re-glue it on. This way it really truly looks like a side view. So think about any layering dies that you have and how you can alter them to get a completely different look. In this case, I went from 1 forward-facing butterfly to 2 side-facing butterflies. Again, it's all about just stretching your dies and getting more value from them. So there I glued the butterfly antenna back on, so now it looks like 2 sideward-facing butterflies. Next, I'm using the Birch Press Dazzle Mini Frame Layering Die Set. I used this in my last video too. It's a really good one that fits nicely in the center of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. Well, here I die cut it from all white cardstock, all the layers from white, and I arranged 2. See how one fits in the middle nicely? Or you can stack 2 on top of each other and it covers a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. Or you can put them side by side and use it on a slimline card. And that's what I thought I'd do today. So if you have a smaller basic layering die set, look at how you can kind of double it up or arrange it a little bit differently to get a different look. In this case, I took a die set that's basically meant for a small note card and used it for slimline. So I put those 2 layered white die cuts side by side on a white note card, and now I have my layered butterflies facing in. In the center, I have the Hey There from A Pocket Full of Happiness. I showed you those dies at the beginning of the video, and I used the pink glitter cardstock for the letters on that too. I also glued a few little silver gemstones here and there for extra sparkle. So in this case, I took a small layering die set meant for a smaller note card, put them side by side to go on a slimline, and I took a forward-facing butterfly, cut it in half and changed it a bit to be 2 side-facing butterflies. I did a lot of white layering on the background there, but I feel like that adds a lot of interest and texture without distracting from those colorful butterflies on top. And remember the power of using a glitter or specialty cardstock with these layering die cuts. It really makes it pop even more. So I hope between this video and the other that I've linked to, I've shown you many ways to use your layering dies. In the last video, I talked about how to use them as stencils. Today, I talked about how to alter them to get different looks. Layering dies are a great way to make a really detailed card quickly. However, they do have that higher price point, so we really want to stretch how we use them. If you're interested in the ones I talked about today, I always link them below to multiple sources in my description, so be sure to check that out if you want. You can also go to my blog where there's lots of photos, and you can save these cards in this video and bookmark it for a future reference. Also at the end, I'll link to the other 2 videos that I mentioned in this one. I'm hoping this information is helpful to you. I try to share as many examples as possible so that you can be inspired a bit more. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.